Yes. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great Saturday. It's a cool one here, a little breezy, but it's a beautiful day. Sun is shining, a few clouds, perfect maritime day. Not too hot, not too cold. I've been really excited about today's project because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, this one's got oodles of technique, but they're all basics. And a fun stencil technique for that background. It ends up looking like vintage wallpaper by the time you're done. I love this look. And it's a really great technique for doing a background because it provides a little bit of movement, a little bit of pattern, and it supports almost any kind of design. I wanted this one to have a little elegance, a little country, and a little rustic all combined into one thing, and I think I achieved it using this background. So I really like this one. And the stencil that I used for this one is called Baroque Background. It's an old stencil. I've been using it for years. In fact, my kitchen is done using this particular stencil, and I love the design. It works really well with this one. So this is a fun one. I only went with very simple lettering, so I think we're going to have fun with that. And a fun technique for doing leaves that once you figure it out, once you learn it, you're going to love it because it gives texture, it gives dimension, and it provides you with all the veins and the details in the leaves with very little effort. So we're going to do that. And then, of course, I had to put in a little bird because I love either birds, butterflies, and bugs in general. You've got to have some sort of critter in there if you're going to have flowers. And then an elegant magnolia. I just love magnolias. This one was inspired, actually, by one of my neighbors. He has a beautiful magnolia tree on his front lawn. They do not grow very well here, so he's done exceptionally well having one that has lasted as long as it has. And this summer, or this spring, it was absolutely spectacular, covered in the most beautiful pink and white blooms. So this is the one we're doing today. It's in the garden au jardin. I love this one. But before we get started on the painting part, let's talk about the giveaways. Of course, we have giveaways today. We always have giveaways. Today we're giving away 3 packages, and the subject of this one is all about pencils. So we have some wonderful gifts from Tombow, USA. So you've got a nice little set of professional drawing pencils. I believe one of them even has a mechanical pencil set in there that you're going to love, because I love my Tombow. There's a bunch of other goodies in there, as well as some stencils, courtesy of TracyMoreau.net. So I think you'll have fun. In order to get your name on the wheel for the giveaways, all you have to do is just join us in the chat, like and share the video, and that's it. We'll copy and paste the list of names from the chat, both on Facebook and on YouTube. All those names go onto the wheel, and then we select 3 winners at the end of today's live. So that's about it. But before I go further, I have to say hello to a couple of people. I have to say hello to Kathy McAllister, Colorado, and Sue Potts, of course, and Phyllis Griffey, hello. And Bonnie Clock, hi. I love seeing that on the chat. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Bonnie. And who else is in here? Oh, my goodness, everybody's here. Linda Salsini from Northern Michigan. Hello. Janet Demon. Hi, hon. Kim McCutcheon. Gail Woolsey. Hello, sweetie. And Elaine Wiedemann. Hello, Elaine. And Carol Colbert. Good night. Good morning. I should say good night. Good grief. Debbie Marlowe. Bobby Corey. Marjorie Eaton. Hello, sweetheart. And Melissa Hayes, hello, from Georgia. Oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch in here today. Robert Pearson, hello. And Cheryl Martins, hello, hello. And there's Renee. Maze is in here. Hi, Pud.
Come on up.
Hey, Pop. Up, up, up. Come on. Whoops.
Say hi.
Hi. Come on.
Come on up.
There she is. There's Maze. What you doing?
Bitey.
She is bitey today.
Ow, ow.
I know.
Hi.
There, so everybody said their hellos.
All right.
Off you go. Go mow the lawn. She's going to keep them busy today. So if you guys are ready to get started painting in the garden, so am I. So this is the piece we're doing today. I just love this one. It's it's surprisingly simple to paint, but it is, there's something elegant about it. It just appeals to me. Magnolia is such an elegant flower to start with. And I love the idea of putting it in this little rustic watering can, and then the elegant old wallpaper in the background. Vitamin? You're very welcome, Elaine. It's a good German name, Vitamin. But I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. It is an elegant piece. Ugh, don't think you need that overhead lamp showing up in it. But it is. It's a fun piece to do. So I've broken this up into two pieces. So I'm going to show you how to do the background because I had to do a little bit of prep. Otherwise we'd be here until Christmas. Hi Sheila Landry. Hello sweetheart. And Karen Jones. And Carrie Henderson. Oh my goodness, everybody's here today. I gotta say hi to Mary, Linda's mom. Hello, sweetheart. Good morning, Anastasia. And Kim McCutcheon. So this background is super simple. And honestly, the most effective backgrounds usually are. The more convoluted they become, the more complex they become, the busier they become. So simple is usually the best. Hi, Carol. Oh, tell Janet hello for me. Thank you. It now has a Malinois added to Reno PD's search animal. Wow. Nice. Hi, Cindy. I have so much fun doing these things. So this is the surface. I've got 2 coats of lamp black, and I gave it a light sanding. I just wiped off the dust. The stencil I'm using is this one. This is called Baroque Background. I think this one is just so delicate and it's elegant, but it's not super busy. So I'm going to grab a piece of painter's tape. I like to tape my stencil in place just to keep things from shifting. So when you're positioning your stencil, we immediately think that we should fit everything inside the confines of our surface. And what you end up with is something that looks like it's inside a surface as opposed to continuing. So I like to take my ring off, or my stencil off the surface. Sorry, Ramona distracted me. Isn't that a cute ring? It's a love knot. My husband gave me the earrings, and I have a beautiful pendant and the ring. It's just a little love knot. It's very cute. So I'm going to tape that into place. I like to take it off the surface, even if it's only just a little bit. The surface size that I'm using for the finished piece is an 8x10. It's not a large surface. You can work on a piece of masonite, on an artist's panel, or on a canvas. You could even do this on watercolor paper if you like, or acrylic pad paper. Any one of them will work just fine. So my original piece is done on an 8x10. I'm using hardboard, which is a 1/16 of an inch hardboard. I love these to paint on. They're very smooth. Now, the stencil brush that I'm using is this one. It's a 5/8 Dynasty Stencil Pro stencil brush. I like these. You can use a 5/8, you can use a 1/2 inch, whatever works for you. This one is dirty. So, the color I'm using for this is cobblestone. And I'm going to pick up a little of this warm gray. That's how I describe it. It's a warm gray. It's like a mud color, cobblestone if you're looking for it. It's a Decor acrylic. We're going to put a little bit of that in the stencil brush. Swirl it in both directions. And then you're going to blot on a piece of paper towel, just so that you don't have gobs of wet paint. And then I try to start my stenciling on a closed piece, like a larger area where there's plastic, and start my swirling there. so that if I have a gob of paint, that's where it's going to land and not inside the design. So I'm just lightly applying color. You don't want this to be fully opaque. It's going to have a dry, unfinished look, and that's what we want. Now, the goal here is to create sort of a distressed appearance, but a soft appearance at the same time. So I'm using very little paint in a circular fashion to apply the color. So it's going to look a little foggy, less than painted. So it is going to have a dry appearance. I like this more worn look. So it's not fully opaque. You can still see a great deal of the color, but you can still see a lot of the black through it. So it takes on a very muted look. So you can see we've got an open space here. So I take the top half of the stencil, take it off the page just slightly, and bring it up so it almost touches the design in front of it. Move your tape to keep it from shifting. And again, light application. You're not using a heavy application of color. We just want a dry look to this. Here we go. There we are. So you can see it just continues the design rather seamlessly. And then I'm going to do the same thing this way. Get it as close as I can, but not touching. And again, I take it off the surface. Now, on an 8x10, you're going to have to continue it a little further, but that's all right. So, dry application. Don't need a ton of color on here. It's very soft, very subtle. It's not fully opaque. So if you get little flaws in it, little scrapes, little brush marks or whatever, don't worry about it. If you do happen to get a little more paint on there than you planned, you're just going to have to do a little more work afterwards. That's all. So, don't forget, change directions frequently. There we are. So I think, yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then again, I'm going to turn that, tape it down, and then we'll finish that off. I love this soft look. It works very well for this type of application. And when you're done, it has a really nice, it is similar to a flourish stencil. Actually, a flourish stencil would work very well too. You just need something that has a delicacy to it, something that's not too solid. So we've got a nice pattern. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that. So at this point, we're going to sand our surface. And now, when you're sanding, you're going to sand in one direction. In my case, I'm going left to right, horizontally, or vertically, either or. And I want to wear through the pattern a little bit, just to soften it all. Voila. And then I'm going to take my piece of paper towel and wipe off the dust. So now it's very subtle. So this is where you take your base color. In this case, I've used black. You can do this actually with lighter colors as well. So if you do a lighter background, you're going to use the darker stencil, and then you're going to go over it with a lighter color. In our case, we used a darker background. We used a lighter color for the stencil design. Now we're going to come back to our base color, which is that lamp black. We're going to pick up a little of this. We don't need a lot of it. And then I'm going to use, you can use a fugly brush. You can use a nice big angle, big wash, big flat wash brush, as long as it's something that's going to hold a bunch of paint and lots of water or glaze. So I've got lots of water in here. We want a very runny, and we're going to apply that directly over our stencil pattern. Now if you thin out your paint enough, it's going to mute that stencil design just a little. You may even see some brush marks in it. That's okay. We want to subdue that stenciling just a little. Get that wash over top of it. I like to do one direction. In this case, I'm going horizontally across the design. And I'm going to dry this really well. Now that wash just provides us with a very soft look. So we still see the pattern. We still have that stencil design there. It just muted it a little bit and softened it. So now we have what looks like an old crushed velvet or a beautiful old wallpaper. It's an elegant background. It looks so pretty. Now you can do this in a variety of different colors. It is spectacular with red and gold. If you use a red background, use gold stenciling and then put a wash of the red over top, it's elegant to the extreme. It has that real Baroque feeling to it, that ostentatious appearance. This one has sort of that rustic delicacy. It's very, very pretty. I love this for backgrounds. It's, depending on the stencil you choose, you can get some really gorgeous effects. And I love this look. And it particularly works well for this. I wanted this to have sort of an elegance to it, something old world about it. And this stencil really worked well for that. So I transferred the line drawing on, and I base coated the watering can with a color that we don't see often anymore, that I really have sort of developed a new love for. This is Williamsburg Blue. Such a rich color, and it's wonderful on black. It's surprising how well it looks on black. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous tone. So this is our base color for our watering can. We're going to start with our background. I like working from the back forward. And ordinarily I would do this, the step I'm going to do first before I did this, but I needed to save a little bit of time today. So for this background, we need to get a little bit of a highlight in behind this can, because our light source is right about here. Our light source is coming from the forward left. And that means that it's striking the wall in behind our can. So we need a little bit of warm white. And we're going to use a little bit of either water or glaze. You can use either or. It doesn't really matter at this stage of the game. I am going to get my juice coming up because I love my glaze. And we're going to use a little bit of glaze, and we're going to heavily thin some warm white. Now you can do this with a round or an angle or whatever brush you prefer. I'm just using an angle because that's my preference. And it is heavily thinned, and we're going to start with a very loose wash of this heavily thinned warm white in behind our watering can, and we're going to come up to that line in the back, just like that. I'm going to grab my mop. It's a sloppy application of color. It's not, we're not talking about the perfect float. We're just going to put like a little bit of color back there. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. And just to that horizontal line. That's the tabletop. And this is a very subtle highlight. And I'm going to use my mop just to blend the edge a little bit. There we go. Now this is not an in-your-face highlight. It doesn't need to be bright. It just needs to change the light a little bit back there. That's all. There we go. Now, before we get too far along, I'm going to grab an eraser, and we're going to take off this graphite line, that white one at the top of the table. We're going to take that off. Right there. I truly dislike graphite lines. Now I'm going to take my angled shader, and we're going to put a float of lamp black on the tabletop. And this is where we get that nice straight tabletop line. There we go. And then you can just let it run out. Now, we will come back and brighten some of these highlights as we work, but for now, this gives us that nice, simple highlight in the back. If it needs more later on, we'll brighten it, but if it doesn't, then it's good to go. So we've already established the tabletop, we've established the highlight in the background. So now we're going to start on some of these leaves back here. As I said, I like working from the back forward. So the color I'm using is a little bit of lush green. I love lush green. If you don't have it, you can use avocado, light, what is that called? Avocado toast. Good grief. English is the second language today. Or you can use antique green is another good color. Now I'm going to use a small round, and we're going to base coat all of these leaves. Linda, mine has just about had it too. So I'm going to base coat my leaves with one coat of lush green. Just one. Don't really need more than that. We're going to put a variety of colors over top, so one coat is sufficient. And no, it doesn't cover it fully. That's okay. It is quite alright. Now, when I'm painting leaves, I usually paint them following the shape of the leaf. So I can do it in just a couple of strokes. So, by example, here we go. This piece is, I think, one of my favorite pieces I've done recently. And I think that's why I sat here and just painted for absolute pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed painting this one. It was just a pleasure to do. And it's funny that when you're painting something and you know it's going to turn out just the way you wanted it to, because you had such a great time doing it. And this one is really no more difficult than anything else that we do on Saturdays. I think it just looks it. I just brought in a bunch of... The can, Kathy, is Williamsburg Blue. Great color. It's an old color, too. It's one of those ones that, has been around since time out of mind. And it's such a great color. Not one I have used much, but it was perfect for this. And it's also perfect for this little bird. And before you ask, the bird is a type of nuthatch. Although I love birds, I am not a twitcher. Is that the word that they use in the UK? So I might be mistaken. I saw the photograph. I loved the little bird. I loved the colors because it matched the pot. And so our nuthatches here are very small and almost bullet shaped. They're very teeny tiny and they have a very long beak. But I know that they're not the only type of nuthatch out there, so. But I loved the colors in this one, and it was perfect for my pot. I love birds too. We have a yard full of them. We feed squirrels and birds and whatnot. So we get cardinals, we get beautiful woodpeckers. Speaking of which, one of our neighbors, they have a zip line in their backyard for their kids. And in order for the kids to use the zip line, they have a metal ladder. And the ladder leans up against a tree in their yard, and one of the woodpeckers locally, just for whatever reason, seems to think that it's fun to hammer away at this ladder. So you can tell when that woodpecker's in the neighborhood because you can hear him drumming away on this metal ladder. It's absolutely hilarious because it's like pang, 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 pang. It is so funny. So there's not a ton of leaves in this piece. Not a ton at all. Yeah, I know that there's different types of nuthatches, especially, but yeah, this one looks a bit more like a chickadee, but apparently it's a nuthatch of some variety. I don't know what type. It falls into that family. So, I'm going to dry this. I missed a spot. Next Saturday, we're going to be doing a... Oh, Shelby, I'm so glad you're painting this one. And I'm so glad that you're back since your accident. You would think so, but he does it on a regular basis, Cindy. It's hilarious. So next Saturday we're going to be doing a fall piece. I've been playing with a bunch of ideas, and I have this penchant for painting pumpkins. So we've got a pumpkin piece with florals and berries and a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to be doing a nice little fall piece that you can hang on your door, or you can stand up in your dining room or whatever. You can do some fun stuff with it. And it'll work on a variety of surfaces. So we're going to be doing something fall-ish. Sheila, you have 3 crows that come daily. Start leaving something out for them. I have a friend in the UK that does this, and they start bringing her presents. It's hilarious. So we have our leaves painted. We're going to do that little bird right at the very end. So I'm not even going to base coat it right now, but we're going to do that right at the very end. Because he's a little more complex than the rest. So I'm going to, I've got my little liner here. I've got a little branch in here, in behind our little bird. And I missed these 2 little leaves on the front of this little blossom here. There's 2 small leaves that I neglected. And 2 leaves up here that I neglected. Goodness. Lights are on, nobody's home. Hooded orioles. Oh, I bet they're pretty. We don't see hummingbirds yet. It's a little early for us. Although it won't be too much longer though. It's usually July when we start seeing the hummers. And I love them. But the woodpeckers, we have 2 different varieties here. We have pileated woodpecker, and then we have these little ones, the wee little ones that are really cute. But then we have the great big ones as well. So, lovely. Make sure this is dry because I'm notorious for landing my hands in it if I'm not paying attention. I would love, Claudette, I know what you mean. I've still been shipping things, but I just have this horrible feeling that they're going to go on strike again. I wish they'd just make a decision and get it on with. Even the labor district, everything has been delayed by 3-4 weeks. So, it's ridiculous. Even the stuff that is moving is taking forever to ship, to get where it needs to go. And it's frustrating. There we go. So the focus of this one is walking floats. I had somebody email me a question the other day asking about what do you mean when you say walking a float? And essentially what it means is that when you walk out a float, you're going to start at the outer edge and you're going to move the float, meaning you're going to move that darker value a little further out. So you just float and then basically work it out. So you're walking the float away from the darker value, which means that you're going to have that gradient going to be much longer. Now, if you're using smaller brushes in a larger space, you often have to walk a float out to get it as wide as you need it. Most of the time, though, we have such a variety of brushes that you can use a larger flat or an angled shader to get those nice wide floats. However, I really like the idea of knowing how to walk a float out because it is a nifty skill to have, and it's helpful at times. So we are going to use that today to do the shading on our watering can. I like walking a float out because it gives you a tremendous amount of control, and you can decide where you need to stop. In this particular piece, we're going to use, just give me a chance to find my chalk pencil, we're going to divide the can into thirds. So our shading is going to cover about 1/3 on either side, leaving about 1/3 in the center of the can for the highlighted area. Which means that the float that we start here, we have to walk it out so that the gradient, or that change from dark to light, stops at about here. That doesn't mean that it's going to be that color, but it just needs to end somewhere along here so that we have a nice open space for that highlight. So this one, that's why I put these lines in, because one, it's chalk, it'll just disappear anyhow, but it'll give you an idea of where your shadows need to end, and that's always makes things a little easier. So I like working in thirds on something like this because it just seems to simplify things a little bit. And and I've gone with a very basic light source, so my light source is right here. Just, it's coming forward, and then it's just slightly to the left. So it's giving us, a nice highlight, about roughly the center third of the tin. So that's going to make things a little bit easier. And it's also an easy way to visualize it on something like this. So the darker value will cover about 1/3 on either side, and then the highlight center will be in the center. That's just the simplest way to do it. Not necessarily technically the perfect way to do it, but it is the simplest. And it still gives you a great result in the end. So we're going to start with these leaves. I love this technique for the leaves. It looks so cool, and it gives you great results in the end. I love this look. And it takes people a little while to master it. It takes a little practice, but I'm going to show you a cheat. So, every leaf has a center vein, like so. Just trace it in. Ignore the flip over, because we're going to deal with the flip over. So there's our center vein on each of these leaves. And you can do this with a chalk pencil. It's not a bad thing. It's a cheat, but it works. And if all you need is a visual guide to help you, what's the problem? So just take your chalk pencil and see what I've done? I put in the center vein just with a chalk pencil. And yes, Denise, I totally agree. Simple is always good. Now I'm going to use a small round. I'm thinking like a number 4 or number 2. What is this one? It's a 3. Of course it is. I couldn't get numbering. I've got a 3. So number 3 round, I'm going to pick up a little bit of margarita. I'm just thinning this out a little bit. And we're going to do comma strokes. And we're going to start the comma stroke just shy. Oops. Could have done that better. Just shy of that center vein. Like that. They are not perfect comma strokes. They don't need to be. And they can run out. So they start just shy of that center vein that we drew in there. They don't have to be perfect. Look. Kind of rustic. As I said, they don't have to be perfect. And we're going to do that to each of the leaves. Just make them fit. You can see they're not perfect. They don't need to be. They're going to be smaller on some of those smaller leaves. If you have one with a flip over, just ignore the flip over. You're going to put it back in later. It's easier than trying to paint around it. Look at that. Even these little ones that are tucked underneath, just little strokes, just so that there's a little color in there. As I said, they don't have to be perfect. Yes, Gail, it is margarita. Rose Frank, you're late because you had to go buy art supplies? Good for you. I did a little art supply shopping today myself. I have not been able to find good palette paper anywhere. And so I had to order some Gray Matters palette online. I was out again. I'm down to the little bits that I have stashed away. There we go. So yes, it looks a little rough, and that's okay. Rough is okay. We're going to make it look beautiful anyway. So I know it looks a little messy and it's a little garish, but this is such a fun technique and it works so well. Now, when you start putting in your shading on these leaves, all of those graphite lines that we're showing, all of that chalk line, it's all going to disappear. Any plans for painting Christmas in July? Yeah, actually. I do want to do something for Christmas in July. Next week we're going to be doing fall in June, so whew. Pardon me, I'm having a moment. Holy Moses. I love Christmas stuff, so it's an easy one for me. I'm going to grab, where did that come from? Well, I'm going to grab a 3/8 angled shader, if I can find one. Good gravy, Marie. Oh, there's one. Dynasty Faux Squirrel. Look at this one, it's brand spanking. Wowzers, Batman. So, our shading color for these leaves, I'm going to use black green. You can use plantation pine. You're welcome, Karen. Enjoy it. I'm going to use, I've got a little bit of plantation pine here. I love this green. I'm going to set that. I've also got a little bit of black green. I like black green. I do like them in combination too. So we're going to shade these. I'm going to use plantation pine first. So I'm going to shade this leaf at the base where it joins the stem. Nice U-shaped float right at the base of the leaf. And it's not quite dark enough, but it is rich. I do love the richness of plantation pine. So, nice little float at the base of the leaf where it joins the stem. It's a U-shaped float. We're going to do that to all of the leaves. Just where it joins the stem. And you see what it does to that margarita? It just gives it, there's a lushness to it. There's a richness to it. And it's a nice wide float. Don't be shy with it. It's going to give this nice tone. There. And you're going to use that plantation pine up underneath those petals. Same idea. Make sure that it gives you that nice shadow in there. right at the base where it joins the stem. And I love plantation pine. And I love the depth that black green gives this. And you're going to see that in just a minute. But this plantation pine just gives all of this green, this richness. There's a lushness to this color. And especially over top of that margarita, it's just gives everything a really nice tone. And I like a 3/8 angle because it's comfortable in there. I love the Gray Matters palette, especially for mixing color. Gives you a nice neutral base to mix color with. So I'm just going to deepen that a little. So I'm going to dry that, and then we're going to give those leaves a lovely float. What did Devin come to say? Patrick, you can take the ferry from New Brunswick across the Bay of Fundy, from St. John over to Digby. And it would be just a drive down the highway. Digby's not far from where Sheila lives, and I'm not far from St. John, so I'm about an hour from St. John. Parchment paper works too, yes, but I like the Gray Matters. Yes, be where the glitter is. Oh, there's no glitter in this piece. So our next shading color is that is that black green. So we're going to shade again. It's a little smaller this time. Going to give us that nice dark shadow right at the base. It's a slightly smaller shading. And I look at how it just gives you this really nice tone. And there's lots of tour companies here that go around the Maritimes. It's not hard to find something. So, nice dark float. This is going to give you that really nice dimension in here. There we go. This also gives you nice separation of all of these leaves. But that plantation pine just gives this green such a richness. I sat here the other night and just played in paint. I've been playing with some of the newer colors to see what kind of fun things I can do with them. And I love some of these new colors. They're just so pretty. So I've got that darker shading in. Yeah. Black paper underneath the white it helps, yes. But I got a funny feeling I'm going to have to settle for white anyway because it's hard to find the gray these days. So we're going to shade the center vein with a float of that black green. I love this color. I like using that comma stroke. It actually provides a lot of dimension to these leaves. It gives them vein lines with very little effort, and it gives them structure, and it gives them texture. And it's an old technique. You see this technique in Zostava a lot, where they layer comma strokes one on top of the other. Heather Reddick uses this technique for her stroke work. It's just really effective. It creates a lot of really great texture. I love texture in painting. I like seeing how things shape up. Look at that. Oh, so pretty. There's Deb Bloomfield. Hello, sweetie. It's so nice to have you back. I'm glad you're feeling better. Oops. You know, every once in a while, I do something that just makes me realize that I'm not the be-all and end-all. I make mistakes that keep me humble. So I'm taking a little of that black-green, just a little bit of it, up the back side of that stem. And I'm doing the same thing to these little stems in here. Just a little shadow. There we go. Nice. So I'm going to dry that. We're going to highlight these leaves. And I'm going to grab a little bit Well, now, Linda, that's a smart idea. Wow, that's a really clever. So one of the colors that I'm using for these leaves, for these flowers, is called Berry Cobbler. I love this color. It's not a pink, it's not a purple, it's just a very lush and yummy looking color. And I'm going to use it in the flowers, which means I want to bring a little of it into those leaves. So we're going to highlight our leaves using a little bit of thinned margarita. We're going to bring a little of that onto the tips of the leaf and down the center vein. So a little bit toward there, but definitely some down the center vein. Gives our leaves some really nice highlights. And I like a little on the opposite side too. It just gives the leaves a little extra something. So just make sure that you thin the margarita really well before you do this, so that it doesn't bury everything. We don't want to bury it. We just want to bring a little highlight in. Little float, bring a little out to the outer edge too. There we go. And this is what I mean. So down that center vein, out to the point, bring a little of that color down the side of the leaf and on both sides. Just a little of that margarita. It just gives the leaf a nice rounded over effect. Marty, what are you looking for? I have a silicone sheet like that. I got it off of Amazon, and it worked okay. I just found it was, because I paint so much, I found I spent more time cleaning it than I did painting, so I didn't use it for very long. It does keep your workspace nice and tidy, though, I will say that. So, little float. Excellent. I'm so glad you're back with us, Deb. Deb Bloomfield is one of our members. She's been with me for a long time. And she has not been well, and we're so happy that she's back. She has been sorely missed. Her sense of humor has been sorely missed. Because she is our comedian. So we're grateful she's back and feeling better. Here we go. So there's our leaves. Now we have these little tiny leaves at the base of this flower. It's a little small to be doing any teeny tiny details, but we do need to put a highlight on them. So, a little highlight there, and there. I'm going to come up to this one. I'm going to put a little highlight like that. There's nothing that works so good as a brand new brush. And this one is brand spanking. There we go. She does indeed have a wicked sense of humor. And she's marvelous to have around. Good morning, Janine, I'm sorry. So, remember I said we're going to be using a little of that berry cobbler in our leaves. There's nothing. Hi, Terry. Thank you. We're going to pull a little reflected color in, and that means I'm going to use just a tiny amount of that berry cobbler. We're going to put a little bit into a few of the leaves, and I like a little bit at the point and just on a few. We don't need to have it everywhere, but I'm going to bring it in close to some of the flowers that are, or the leaves that are close to the flowers. I like that little blush of color. It does wonderful things for the leaves. And then I'm going to bring a little bit down here too. Just a little. It just gives the leaves a little more realism. And I do love that little peak of color in there. It just makes things more lively. And it brings the color around. Hi, Mary Klein. So I'm going to dry that. Then I'm going to change up my palette paper so that we have a clean palette for this part. There we are. So for our pretty little magnolia here, the colors we're using for the flower are berry cobbler, gentle heather. Hey, Gwen. Thank you. Nice to see you here. Hi, Marianne. Another color I'm using in this one is asphaltum. I love this piece. Surprisingly, not as many colors in it as you'd expect. So I've got one coat of warm white on my magnolias. Not perfectly base coated, but they're fine. We're going to start by putting a shadow of gentle heather. You can use any pink, purple, tone in here will be just fine. So I'm going to separate all of these petals with a float of gentle heather, and I'm going to walk the color up about halfway up the petal. This is just going to give us that nice little blush of color, and it's really hard to see it in the... Sure, Devon hot pink, why not? I've seen so many diverse colors of magnolia. Some have more purple, some have more pink. Oh my Lord, Deb. So I'm thinning this, but not so much that it's fully transparent. And each of those flowers is going to get a blush of that. I love this color. I am, however, avoiding the inside of these petals. I just want it on the outside. So on those larger flips, just like that. Love this color. But not to the inside. And don't be afraid to walk this color up. We have lots of time to get this color in. Look at that. So pretty. Such a delicate color. I know under the lights you could barely see it, but it's quite pink. Let's see if I turn it a little bit. I just want to get it a little deeper. There we go. So don't be afraid, to put 2 or 3 floats of this in. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just going to give us richer color in the end. So don't be afraid to, pop some more in. It's not going to hurt. If you feel it's looking a little wishy-washy, put more in. Just like that. Such a pretty color. There we are. Dry this really well. And we're going to take our liner brush and we're going to thin some of that berry cobbler. Need it quite thin because we're going to make very fine lines in our flower. And starting from the bottom, I like starting from this large forward petal here. Starting from the bottom, you're going to pull these lines up and let them run out just past that white. Just as it comes up like that. Now I know that it's very fine, but you can see just like that. So follow the shape of the petal. The petal is not flat, it's got a slight curve to it, so keep that in mind when you're putting those lines in. And don't be afraid to come back in and put some shorter ones in between. They don't have to go all the way to the top. The shorter ones can go about halfway. And just let them run out. So there you go. And you're going to do the same thing to some of these. Just like that. Those fine lines are going to follow the shape of that petal. Just like so. I love this look. It's just, there's something elegant, like truly elegant about magnolia. Maybe it's that old South thing, I don't know, but they're just so pretty. Here we go. So you notice on that flip turns this way, so the curve of those lines has to do the same thing. So pretty. And we're going to do the same thing to these down here in the bottom. And just keep them light. Easy peasy. So, as I said, we're going to do the first row almost at the top, and then that second batch is just going to be a little smaller and about halfway up, so that you have this nice texture in there. So, looking pretty good. So we're going to take our angled shader and we're going to pick up a little bit of that berry cobbler. I love this color. You're going to blend it out well. You don't want this to be full strength. You want it soft. And we're going to shade along the bottom of these flowers. Remember what I said about walking a float up? I walk floats all the time. The idea is to bring that color up the petal. Whoops, come on. Where's my autofocus? Come on. Nope. So we have this nice transition here. Do the same thing across the bottom of those petals. Yeah, it was blurred because my autofocus wasn't autofocusing. Here we go. And you're going to do the same thing to each of these flowers. More layers, more depth. Back to normal. I think I was just talking away from my microphone. Now, one of the best things about this kind of a technique is that if at any time it isn't quite sharp enough or dark enough, you can always go back in and put a nice thin layer of that color on. Just like that. So you can deepen it with the next float will give you all of the depth you want. You can just make it a little smaller. In this case, I'm going to focus down here in the lower portion of the flower and deepen it with another float. There we go. And look at all of the texture we got out of that. That little bit of color is just marvelous. Have a great day, Sheila. So I've got a little bit of asphaltum, and I'm going to use just a small amount, and we're going to thin it out quite a bit. You don't want this full strength. This is the shading color we're going to use for the inside of our flowers. So all of those shaded areas on the inside of the petals gets shaded with asphaltum. Underneath those turnovers, inside those flowers, a little bit of thinned asphaltum. Easy peasy. A little bit. Asphaltum is such a versatile color. You can do such fun things with it. And I'm going to show you just how easy it is. I'm using it inside all of these petals to get that shadow back there. So look at how our flower has suddenly got a bit more depth. So now we're going to do something. I'm going to grab my warm white. And we're going to put a float at the edges of the petals. You can do this with titanium white too. If you want to, you don't have to do it with warm white. So you're going to come to the edge of the petals, thin out your warm white a little, and you're going to put a float along the edge of the petals. And yes, the float's going to overlap all that line work that you just did. And it's fine, don't worry. It's going to soften and mute all of that line work, soften those floats that we did. Look at the depth we get. It makes our flowers look a bit more opaque, but not solid. You don't want them to look solid. And this, I love how this looks. Little float out at the edge also crisps things up, gives it a nice little detail at the edges, softens all those borders. And now we're going to go to the inside. Oh, come on, autofocus, there we go. We're going to go to the inside of our petals, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put a float of that warm white at the top edge of those petals, because we want a nice clean, crisp line at the edges of those petals, just like that. So they have a little of that highlight as well. We want those borders to be softened a little. Look at that. I love that little bit of white at the top edge of the petals. Just gives everything a nice softness. And I'm going to do that for the others as well. That little float seems to soften the barrier between those colors, so it doesn't look so hard edged. And then our flowers take on more of a translucent look as opposed to a fully opaque look. And then we're going to use a white gel pen to detail the edges of these petals. But I like that softness that float of warm white does. Just gives those petals that really nice look. There we go. So we've got that shape. We're going to take some asphaltum, heavily thinned. We don't want it too dark. And we're going to deepen all of that shading just a little bit. It just tones it. Brings everything in line. And it's not a strong float. It's heavily thinned asphaltum, but it just brings all of these colors in line. Because we've used asphaltum on the inside, we need to have a little of it on the outside as well, just to keep everything so there we go. Now the finishing part to these magnolias is our white gel pen. I also need my liner brush. So we have a couple of little turnovers. I need to paint them white. So I've got one here. I'm going to paint this little flip over white. There's one there. Pretty good. So I'm going to dry this really well, and then we're going to use, is dinner a secret today? No, it isn't. Tonight we are having chicken souvlaki. Yeah, we definitely knew that asphaltum was going to be used at some point. That goes without saying. Here we go. So here is, oh Mary, thank you. I've got my white gel pen. I'm going to use that to highlight the edges of my petals. Because I just love this white pen for this. So if you have any rough edges or if you've got lines that are showing through, just a light, now we want it fine. On the edges of those petals. This just gives everything a nice little detail on the edges of petals. There we go. Magnolia petals are thick. They have a thick lining to them. Oops. And I think, at least for me, I really liked the idea that this magnolia would have, that thickness would show. And then when I was painting it, I realized that I could use a white gel pen to get that effect. So I like it. There we are. Easy peasy. There is our pretty magnolia. So we have the flowers done. Now we're going to finish off these leaves. And we need a little bit of our base color, which is lush green. We've got a couple of little flip overs on some of these leaves, and we painted over them in a couple of places. These ones aren't difficult. I've got one here. There's a little flip there. And there was one. Where's the other one? Ah, right. Almost forgot. It's right here. There we go. So, there's our flips. So to connect all of these leaves, we're going to use a little bit of that margarita and a little touch of warm white, just to make it a little bit more opaque. That's all. I don't need it to be really light, but I do need it to be just a touch more opaque. So we're going to use this color to stroke in those stems. I'm going to put a little highlight on these ones. I am a fast painter, Kathy. So we're going to add a little detail to the edges of these leaves. I like doing it with a liner brush. And it's just a very fine, squiggly outline using that heavily thinned margarita mixture. Somebody asked me why I do this. I like the softness of it. It gives a delicacy to these leaves. It makes things look softer and more delicate. And that appeals to me, and I like doing it to all of the leaves. I do it on roses, I do it on every leaf. It all depends. I just like the softness. I've done it with a gel pen too. It doesn't have to be with paint. It doesn't have to be with a lighter color either. You can use a darker one. And it's the same for these ones down here. I really like this. Doesn't have to be right on the edge of the leaf. It can go off the leaf. It can be very tight and squiggly. It can be loopy. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just find that the effect is it just lends a little more delicacy to these leaves, I think. And a softness, not to mention it'll also, if you're looking at your leaves and you think they're less than what they should be, it can hide a multitude of sins too. So if you've got part of your design you're not thrilled with, you can, make it less noticeable. go. So all of my leaves have that light, it's very light, it's very delicate. It's not perfect. I don't like when things are perfect. Oh my goodness, you haven't had breakfast yet? You haven't had your tea? I haven't even hit the bottom of my first cup of tea today. We'll give you an A for effort, Kathy. Yes, I do paint fast. The thing you have to remember is that I've painted this twice already. Precision, I worry about precision in certain things, but not everything. Not everything needs to be absolutely precise. In certain areas, precision is essential, but in other areas, no, not so much. So we've got our leaves and our flowers done. So we're going to now focus on our watering can. I keep wanting to call this a pitcher for some unknown reason. You had a huge flat white coffee that I'm sure had absolutely no calories. White coffee? White coffee. That's an interesting one. So this watering can, I think what appeals to me about this one is that I love the color of it, but it's also a little bit distressed. Just a little. I like the sort of controlled rustiness of this one. Now the color that I used for the rust is red spice. I love red spice. This one is such a neat color. Now when you're looking at the original, especially in the photographs, I'm using red spice to create the rust. So I'm putting little floats of it in places. So underneath the rim of this one. But then I want some of that color to sort of dip down. So I'm using the chisel edge of the brush to create little irregularities. And you can pick and choose where those little irregularities are, how big they are. I rather liked the fact that it has irregularities. Perfection is boring. Imagine if this was just a flat, shiny, perfectly clean watering can. It would look like it just been picked up at Walmart or something. That would be boring. So little bits in between these rails. Again, where you put them is entirely up to you. I kind of liked having just little bits here and there. Some are small, like right there. This one is a little on the small side. And then there's a rather large one that, I walked it down a little because I kind of wanted a bit more. And it doesn't matter if it's perfect. It doesn't have to be. And then, of course, on the watering spout, it has to have some. And I put a little bit around that little ring at the top. The water runs down, so let's run the rust down a little bit down there. And a little here. When you're deciding on where to place rust, you just sort of think about how the watering can is used. I think that's perhaps the biggest thing about whether or not something looks realistic is more the placement. So we get a little patch right there. I love that this has got rust everywhere. There's a little bit everywhere. This thing has seen better days. Still has lots of life left in it, but it's seen better days. So little bits of rust. Some can be quite light, some can be quite large. And then there's the handle as well. And I love the idea that wet hands have handled this watering can. So we're going to pull a fair amount of it up there. Love it. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then, because water runs down, don't forget, we need to have a little on that bottom edge coming up. There we go. A little crossbar here needs a little, gotta have a little bit there. And then on the spout itself, Stencil, that is going to have a little bit of rust on it, just like so. And I like the idea that it's on the underside, just like that. Now it all looks very bright on top of that blue. It's very pretty. I like it. You know, so we would have water running down here and down there. And then, you know, it's been filled up 100 times, so it's going to. And this is a simple rust effect. We're not looking for, you know, extraordinary realism on this one. So, I really, again, remember what I said about having that 2/3 thing, the 1, 2, 3. So, my shading color for this is this one, Deep Midnight Blue. I love the transparency of this, and it works really nicely on this color, on this Williamsburg blue. It's going to give us a really nice shadow. I am going to move to about a 1/2 inch angled shader. I think 1/2 inch is probably my best bet. Here we are. I need a nice wet 1/2 inch angled shader. And I'm going to use some glaze. And I'm going to pick up a small amount of that Deep Midnight Blue. And we need to float this out really well, blend it out really well. You'll notice that I haven't painted any of these bars yet. There's a reason. So we're going to work this dark midnight blue along here. Not dark midnight blue, deep midnight blue. Good God. A little bit under there. And we're going to go right over that rust. And we're going to walk that color out. So by walking, essentially I'm moving that darker value in towards the center. And I'm going to stop it at about that 1/3 mark. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Don't forget, up underneath our little birdie here, need a shadow. Underneath the curve of the handle, need a nice little float. Walk it down. There we go. And in here, and we're going to walk it up. Make sure you take that blue over top of the rust. So we got, look at that, we get a nice shadow in there. And I'm going to dry that. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I need to walk this color out. I got a little too much color. There we go. Didn't have enough water in my brush or enough glaze. The nice thing, because this is a heavily distressed watering can, if you get irregularities in your float, it's okay. We're not looking for perfection, but make sure you take that blue right over top of that rust. Go. So we've got nice little float on there. I'm going to take that same blue and we're going to go along underneath that ridge at the top of the can. Nice little float there. We're going to do the same thing underneath each of those ridges. We're going to put a float. It's a loose float, doesn't have to be tidy. Underneath there, we're going to tone all of that rust. And at the same time, put a nice little shadow underneath each of those ridges. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to deepen that anyway. And then we're going to come over here and do the spout. So the spout gets the same color. Nice big float all the way down this side, right over top of that rust. And again here. Now the top of this spout needs a little float as well. It's a little narrower than the other. So we end up with a light shadow on that side and a wider shadow on this side. So that leaves a nice little open area in the center for a highlight. And you can come back and deepen them. This time it's going to be a little narrower. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is a rustic beat up tin. So those shadows, those floats, those darker values do not need to be perfect. So now, when you look at this, we've got a lighter area in the center portion of that pot. Here we go. Coming together quite nicely. I'm going to get rid of my palette. Now I've got a little bit of Williamsburg blue and I wanted a little bit of gray sky. I like a little sliver of that background color showing, yes. It just helps give this a real curvature. I can get the paint out of this bottle. Here we go. So I have a little bit of Williamsburg blue which is this gorgeous blue-gray. Love this tone. And Gray Sky. This is our lighter value that we're going to mix with our Williamsburg blue. So I'm going to pull some Williamsburg away from that puddle right there. And I'm going to pick up some of that gray, and we're going to make a lighter value of the Williamsburg with that gray. So a little more Williamsburg than gray. Let's say 3 to 1. And this is the color we're going to use for those ridges in our piece. So I'm using a number 2 rigger to stroke these in. It's going to be about a 1/16, maybe 1/8 of an inch wide. And there is one in the back, behind the flowers. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be there. Et voila. There's the ridge. Oh my goodness. Hands are not steady today. There we go. A little bit better. Good grief. Let's try that again. There, that's better. Good Lord. Just like doing the lettering, just press until you fill the space, essentially. And apparently I am not very steady today. That's fortunately for me, it's just paint. And if we mess it up, it's always able to fix it. There we go. Good heavens. Some days I could mess up the Lord's Prayer. This is one of those days. There we go. So all of those trims, as they say, are going to get that color. There we are. And we have the edge of our handle as well. I love this type of painting where there's little rustic, let's call it shabby chic. Although I've never cared for that term, it's close. You know, it's elegant, but old elegant, and kind of worn, but still useful and still beautiful. There we go. Carol. Oh my goodness. Now we have 2 rows that are really close together, and I really want to keep that space between them. So when you're putting this one down, if you end up with one really wide one, then you can come back in with a little bit of black and separate them. but I really want to keep them separate. It just makes that bottom row look so much neater when there's that little thin line between them, and then you don't have to go to the trouble of putting it in. And that thin line really does make this look a little more distressed, which appeals to me. I don't know why it makes it look more distressed, but it does. It's having that little gap in there, I guess. It just does it. There we go. I managed to maintain it this time. I had to paint it in last time. Oh my goodness. And then we've got that little one at the bottom. Just remember to round over that end. Now this one is that bottom seam at the bottom of the can, so if you find it's getting a little wider, that's okay. But ideally it should be roughly the same size as the rest. So we're coming along. This one is actually coming along quite quickly. Oop, Maze is talking. So our can is really starting to come along. I'm going to dry that. And then we have a couple of things that we have to do. We have to paint the stem in there. I missed the stem to the magnolia. There we go. Actually, that's looking really good. I'm quite pleased. Do I do anything special to keep my riggers from looking hairy? You mean like this? All mine look hairy too. Every once in a while I will give them a thorough cleaning, and then I will grab some cheap hair conditioner. Like my favorite is Tame, if you can find a bottle of Tame, because it's like glue. And then what you do is you will clean your brush and then take a little Tame and pack it and let it dry in there. And essentially what it does is it reshapes the brush so that you can come back, and the next time you use it, you just simply rinse it out and it's ready to go. But that's generally what I do. This one, honestly, this one is quite hairy and is in desperate need of a good cleaning. But I think it's just the nature of the brush. After a while, they just all start to look like it's been a rough night. So I've got my little ridges in, and we need to put in a few little cast shadows for those ridges. So I'm going to use my rigger, and I'm going to heavily thin some of that dark blue that we used for the shading, and I'm going to put just underneath it in a few places, particularly where the darkest shadows will be. I'm going to put a stroke of that heavily thinned blue underneath that line. Right over top of the rest, don't worry about any of that. It's a simple little drop shadow, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does imply that this thing is casting a little shadow. Those little ridges. There we go. And it doesn't have to go all the way across. So think about where your highlight is in that middle third. So we're going to take that same mixture that we used. We're going to pick up a little more gray, and we're going to add it to that mixture. So it's going to make a slightly lighter value again. And And this is our highlight color, one of them, for the center right here. Think about where the highlight is, down the center portion. Remember that center third, and it's just a stroke over top of that first one and along the bottom. Doesn't have to be perfect. We've got a little one on the inside outer edge of the handle. And we're going to use that color to base coat this portion of the watering can. So it's about one value lighter. So it's your first highlight on all of those ridges, and it's also the base color for the inside of this. Makes a pretty decent base color. Here we go. Not bad. So we're going to dry that really well. And then we're going to use, I'm using a Mezzaluna dry brush for the center of this. If you haven't got one, you can use a small stencil brush. I use these little ones. These 3/8 or the 1/4 inch stencil brushes will work as well. But I'm going to grab my Mezzaluna. And I'm going to use a little bit of gray sky first. You can use warm white, but if you're not confident about your dry brushing, if you feel that you'd get a little heavy-handed with it, try starting with a gray. So I'm going to go across the center in that 1/3 with a dry brush of that gray. And that gray is going to go in between each of those bars and across the center in that space, that 1/3 space that we talked about at the very beginning. So if you're not confident that you'll be able to do the warm white without really making it white, do it with a little of that gray sky. So it's just a light dry brush right in that center portion, just like that, nice and soft. And then as you go along, it's going to get a little lighter each time so that you end up with a brighter highlight in the very center. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of warm white for that very center. I'm pretty confident that I can do this without messing it up. We'll see. So, in the very center, you're going to have a brighter highlight in the very center of that highlight. Okay, I was wrong about the white, but that's okay. So mine's going to have a brighter highlight than the other one. That's okay. There we go. So I have that little bright highlight there. Softly down the center of this, very soft, right there. Same with that little crossbar. It always amazes me how this highlight just instantly makes this so much more dimensional. There we go. So look at that. Our pot is really taking shape. You can bring a little of that dry brushing inside the handle. little more on the crossbar, smaller highlight to give you the dimension, and a little one on that dome. There we go. Okay. So we need some brighter impact points. So I'm going to take a little of that warm white, and on the top edge, remember that first highlight that we did? I'm going to put a fine white line right at the top edge of that first highlight. Remember that stroke that we did on those ridges? I'm going to put a thin line of warm white just on that top edge. And it can be quite bright, but you want it brightest at the center. There we go. Now this one down here, remember the one that's got the double layer? We're going to put a highlight just below that black line and at the top of that ridge. And those two highlights need to be the same size. Just like that. And then one on the top of this bottom ridge. Right there. We have a few of these to put in. I'm going to take a little of that lighter value that we mixed, and I'm going to put a little stroke of it here on that edge there. I'm going to use a little bit of that warm white there. And the nice part is if at any time you feel something isn't quite dark enough, this is where you go back in. Now we can go over all of these little ridges with a shadow, with a little bit of that dark blue, because they need to be toned to the rest of this. There we go. Nice little shadow in place under there. I'm going to grab my 3/8. This little piece here, it needs a shadow right along that seam with some of that dark blue. Just to give it that dimension. We want that to have a little bit of a dome. So I'm going to put a shadow right there. There we go. So there's holes in this watering can. We're going to put a series of little C strokes like this. I find dip dots are too dark. And too solid. We need these to have sort of a little opening in them. So I just wanted a series of little C strokes. Nothing too dark. Nothing too dark. So we've got a series of little holes in there. We can go in with that little angle and deepen some shadows. You can deepen shadows everywhere if you feel they need it. Don't forget, you need that nice dark shadow at the outside edge so that these rings, these ridges, become part of the can. just like that. And we'll dry that. My nails are not too bad. I fell yesterday and broke the corner off of one. So I had to file it down because I have to do the acrylics because, I mean, otherwise my hands look like feet. Just love how this pot can looks. So we're going to make this can look even a little more distressed. I'm going to dry this really well. We're going to take a little bit of either lamp black. I like lamp black for this personally. I just think it works. You could also do it with a little bit of that red spice if you wanted to. If you want it to look like it's got rust spatters on it, you can do it that way. I'm using a little bit of lamp black. Of course, I got it all over myself here. There we go. And I know I have, there it is. I have a little fugly brush. This is my little 3/4. I'm going to pick up some thinned lamp black. And I'm going to focus the spatter on the can. Of course, I need a little more water because it's not spattering enough. There we go. And I wanted slightly more spatter. So I'm being very controlled with this. I'm just locating the spatter on the can. Of course, I get it everywhere, but that's okay too. So I like that little bit of spatter on the can. It just makes things look so much more realistic. So I'm going to dry this. And then I'm going to use a little bit of asphaltum to finish that stem. Because I messed up with the stem. There is a stem on the magnolia. I'm going to use a little asphaltum to put that in. I'll dry that. Couldn't we all, Robin? Couldn't we all? I wouldn't mind being 20 years younger. And about 60 pounds lighter. And have 48 hours in a day, although I can already get a lot done. So, little stem is dry, but I'm going to take a little bit of lamp black. Just a little. And I'm going to shade inside my can here. I'm going to put a wash of that black. I got to mute that blue line at the back, the edge of the can at the back. So I'm going to use some heavily thinned lamp black back there. There we go. And I managed to completely bury my stems. I didn't mean to do that. There we go. Okay. So we have, not too bad, not too bad. Can looks pretty good. That's probably true, Robin. That is probably true. So we have a little bird. I love this little bird. I just happen to think he's so flippin' cute. So I'm going to grab a round brush. Where did my small round go? There it is. And we're going to thin out a little bit of warm white. Heavily thinned. We're going to put a wash of warm white on our little bird. Now, he has a black throat right there. So I'm just going to avoid that. I should avoid the wing too, but that's okay. Just going to put a light wash of warm white on his belly, like so. Doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. And I'm going to use the same color for his cheek. A little bit of warm white. And a little bit for his head. And I'm just going to leave that little eyebrow, eyeliner, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to leave that blank. Yeah. So he's got a pretty little cheek. Cheek and belly. And then there's also a little bit right here at the back of his neck. Underneath that little, see there's a little black thing at the back of his neck? This needs a little of that warm white too. It's just right there. So I've got just a wash of warm white on this little bird. He doesn't have to be perfect. We're just trying to give ourselves enough opacity so that the colors I put on are going to be fine. So I'm using a little bit of, that's not it, that is, grab the wrong color. I'm using a little bit of salted caramel. Make sure this is dry. I really like salted caramel. This is a great, you can't really call it a yellow, but you can't really call it a brown. It's an unusual color. And I'm going to grab my 3/8 angle. I'm going to pick up a pretty generous amount of that salted caramel. And we're going to use kind of a float, and we're going to walk it up. Just like that. Onto the belly of our bird. Just really like this color. And I'm going to do this again in just a second. Because I want it not fully opaque, but you know, a little more. I know, the strokes aren't perfect. They're very loose. I say that neatness doesn't count and perfection is to be avoided at all costs. And what that means is just the requirement of getting it perfect is unnecessary. Those perfect things come in time, or what you think is perfect comes in time. Okay, so I've got just a thin wash of that salted caramel on our little bird. Super cute. Make sure he's nice and dry. And I'm going to take some asphaltum, nice float of asphaltum, and I'm going to put a float underneath the wing, just like so, all the way up to the shoulder, and a little bit at the derriere, just to give him a nice little shadow at the back end, just like that. Now for the top of the head, I'm going to take that Williamsburg blue, such a pretty color, and I'm going to come right to the back of the head, and I'm going to come forward with it like a float. So what I have is sort of that blue towards the back of the head, and then I'm leaving this part open because we're going to put fine strokes of white on there. So this is where things get fun. I'm going to take my rigger and some Williamsburg blue, and we're going to just stroke in these feathers. So essentially it's just a little stroke, just like that. Hang on a second. Okay. So I'm just literally using a rigger to paint in each individual feather. Just like that. Don't worry about whether or not they're perfectly spaced. If they run into each other, it's okay. We're going to separate them anyway. So there we go. I just like that little space in there. If you can get it, great. If you don't, it's okay. If it comes out all solid, it's all right. We're going to put it back in anyway. There we go. All kinds of feathers. Like anything I paint, everything has layers. So we never try to really get anything done in the first step. Oh my goodness. Yes, Nancy and I go back a very long way. We were partners in crime all through high school. I think you have to have a partner in crime in high school. It's a necessity. And it hasn't just been high school. I mean, she was around when my kids were born. I was around when a couple of hers were born. So there we go. I've got feathers. They're not perfect, but they're there. And I like to try and stroke them in so that I keep that little space between. But if I bugger it up and it ends up being solid, it's okay. We're going to fix that anyhow. So there we go. So there's my bird, all base coated, ready to rock and roll. Hi, Kathy Huff. So we're going to make a similar mixture that we used for our... Yes, I'm godmother to her oldest daughter. Yeah. We go back a long ways. So we're going to take a little bit of that gray and mix it with, just like we did for the can, we're going to mix it with a little of that gray sky to make a slightly lighter value. And we're going to put a stroke of that on each feather, towards the bottom of each feather. This is why I said it's unlikely that those lines are going to matter by the time we're done. So, little stroke of that lighter value gray towards the bottom of each feather. Look at this. Like so. Not perfect. And then there's that little row here. Hi, Robin. So, I was using a 0 rigger to stroke those feathers in. So we have feathers. Look at that. Now I'm going to use that 3/8 angle and a little of that deep midnight blue. And I'm going to put a float underneath that yellow. Another one underneath each row of those feathers, just like that. And then we're going to put a shadow between each of those feathers as well. Don't forget the tail. So the tail gets a dark shadow as well. So our little bird is coming to life. Now I'm going to switch to my liner for a few little details. I'm going to take a little bit of lamp black and I'm going to just carefully stroke in that little wedge at the back of the head with just a few little strokes of lamp black, and the same with the little detail, or sort of a little detail around the eye, and also this little detail under the chin. Just a little stroke of lamp black. Just let it, it's not a solid patch, you're going to kind of give it a little texture anyway. And then we're also going to paint the beak same color, a little bit of lamp black. So our little bird. Okay. The belly color in here is, we did that white wash of warm white, and then we went over it with just a wash of the salted caramel, and then floated under the wing with a little bit of asphaltum. So I've got, I dropped my brush. Okay. I've got a number 2 rigger. I'm going to use the end of the brush handle to put a dip dot where I want the eye. Not too big. There we go. Little tiny dip dot. I'm going to dry that really well. And we're going to, oh, congratulations, Kathy. 39 years. Wow. Charles and I are 41 this year. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to thin out a little bit of warm white. And we're going to do the face and the head first. So for the beak gets a little stroke of warm white, just a little at the top. Try to keep it as fine as you possibly can. And then from the top of the beak, going backwards, we're going to use very fine strokes of warm white. Keep them as fine as you possibly can. So for that, this is what I'm using is a 15-aught extra long detail liner. I like these for this type of detail because they come to such a sharp point. And then around the eye, back and front, we're going to use a very fine little half circle stroke, like so, on either side of the eye to make the eye stand out. And a little dot of the white towards the upper left right, or the upper left side of the eyeball. Hello.
What you got left?
Not too much. We're just finishing up the bird. And then we're going to do the same thing to the cheek. And we're starting at that point near the beak and coming back towards the back of the head. So we're going to work in little tiny overlapping strokes, as fine as you can get them. Just like that. Now, when you're overlapping the black, make sure you come down onto the black a little with a few little fine strands. It just gives the cheek a soft look. So, fine overlapping layers. That's why we don't put a fully white base coat in. We want some really fine details on this little bird. And if you really want a bright highlight, you can come in with a little bit of titanium white, if you like. So don't be afraid to come over the black a little bit. That little bit of white going over top of the black just gives him a nice soft look. And it gives those feathers a nice soft look. So when you come to that little spot at the front of the face here, make sure that you get a couple of nice bright white strokes. And you can bring them back just like that. So look at, we've got a nice little face. So on the chest, again, we're going to overlap that black a little. And we're going to do very light, fine strokes of that white. Keep it brightest towards the front of the chest. The strokes are not long and they are overlapping. And don't forget, come off the chest a little bit, make them soft. Just like that. Some are going to be brighter than others, and that's all right. I like the softness. And as you're working back, they can be a little wider apart, because you're going to come in with some of that salted caramel. And you're going to layer some of that on top too. So, he's looking rather nice. And you can come over to these wings, little fine stroke of that titanium or warm white on that lower edge of some of these feathers, just to highlight some of those feathers. The lower edge. And they are fine little highlights. They don't have to be every feather. Don't forget to do the tail as well. A little bit on the tail. As I said, this bird is not perfect. He's looking so cute. I want to get a little more of asphaltum in there. I think he needs a little more asphaltum. So I'm going to use just some fine strokes of asphaltum, just to keep the texture. Not a lot. I'm going to space them out a bit. because I want to bring in some lighter values of that salted caramel and not just the white. So I'm going to take some salted caramel. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it. Just a little. I don't want to make it, buttery. I just want to make it a little lighter. And we're going to bring in a little of that salted caramel into the highlights on our little bird here. So it's not white. It's just a little salted caramel with a little bit of white in it. He's so cute. And remember this little bit at the back of the neck. We've got to bring in some of that too. Just some nice little feathers. And again, some of the white, some of the salted caramel. Those little strokes make all the difference. And go past the edges, because that helps make everything look softer. And finally, we're going to grab some black. And we're going to, I love this part, we're going to take some of that black down into the white on his cheek with some fine little lines on both sides. And we're going to do the same thing on the chest. We're going to bring that fine lines of the black down into the white on the chest, just a little. And then we're going to make him look a little fluffy on the front with a few little strokes of white right at the throat. And it does two things. It helps define the shape of the bird, but it also keeps him looking very soft. Do the same thing to the back, that patch in the back. Now I have one thing left to do to the back of his head. I'm going to take a little bit of that dark blue, because we've got that lovely Williamsburg in there. I want to deepen the color at the back of the head with just a little float of that dark blue, just like we did to shade the feathers. I love nuthatches. I love the fact that they walk down the trees upside down. They're just so cute. So I've got a little bit of that salted caramel, and he has a lovely little leg that goes along the top of the watering can, and then he has two toes that wrap around the edge. So, and I'm going to shade it with a little stroke of asphaltum, and I'll put a little highlight at the top of his leg here with, a little bit of warm white. Should be thinned though, shouldn't be full strength. And I'm going to brighten a few little spots here with a couple of little shots of warm white, because I can. I'm the boss of me. And I love those little soft lines just make him look so delicate. Those little fine lines on his chest, and these little fine lines on the throat as well as on the back of the head. So we only have one thing really left to do, and that is our lettering. I just think he's such a sweet little piece. So I'm going to fix a couple of things. I'm not thrilled with the tabletop here. It's not quite straight, but that's a little better. Same with this one. And we need a little shadow at the base of our watering can. we need a nice dark shadow right here. Just so it looks like it's sitting on something instead of floating. So I'm going to put a nice little line of black along the bottom, like so. There we are. So when I originally designed this piece, I designed it with the lettering up here. And the more I looked at it, and the first time I painted it, I had it up here. And I just didn't look at it. Just didn't look at it. I didn't like the look of it. It just seemed like something that was stuck up here and it didn't appeal to me. So I took it off and then I rearranged the writing somewhat, just a little. And I tucked it down here in the corner. And it worked much, much better. Except now I can't find my lettering. So I have to go find it. I'll be right back. Oh, my stars. There it is. So this is, I moved it down to this left-hand corner because from composition standpoint, it just didn't work where I had it. It was up in the top left corner. Let me show you. And the more I looked at it, it just meh. It was so meh. So I needed to move it. So I moved it down to the lower left-hand corner, and I love it there. So much better. Now, of course, and I say this all the time and I mean it, don't feel that you have to put it where I put it. Just because I put it there doesn't mean it's the ideal location. It may not work for you. Maybe you have other plans. Maybe you want to change the words altogether. Knock yourself out. I am not going to be offended. I have thicker skin than that. If you want to change it, go ahead and change it. If you want it up there, put it up there. If you like it down at the bottom, put it down at the bottom. If you don't like it, don't do it. It's, you know, I have a penchant for lettering, so I have a tendency to put it in a lot of things, almost everything really, but if it is not your cup of tea, then don't feel that you have to put it in there. From a design standpoint, it's perfectly fine without it. I just happen to like it, that's all. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Tired.
Already? You still have to go to work tonight.
Yeah, it's only for like an hour or two.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not bad. But you'll be ready for bed when you do.
Yup.
What time are you going in?
I'm gonna be there for 7, so we'll be out of here by 6:30.
Oh, okay. Going to be a early night for you.
Yep.
Well, here's hoping that they actually let you out of there on time.
Well, I get to make that call whether I'm needed or not.
Okay. Fair enough. Renee is working a major event at the gallery this evening. Lots of mucky mucks.
Elbows to rub.
Elbows to rub, yeah. Okay, so I think I've managed to trace for everything. Nancy says hi.
Hello.
Cindy Braden says hi. What does it say in English? It says in the garden, au jardin. So I wanted this lettering to be lightly distressed, like everything else in this piece. I didn't want it to be overbearing, and I didn't want it to take away from anything. So I'm using warm white, and I'm thinning it quite heavily. And I'm using a 0 rigger for this. You can use a 2, it'll work fine, but I'm using a 0 because that's what I have here. And I'm using heavily thinned warm white for this. Oops. Apparently, it's a little too heavily thinned. Okay. Let's try that again. See, I'm perfectly capable of messing things up all on my own. There we go. I managed to mess that up, so I have to wipe it off and try again.
Linda's wondering if you're going to do anything with an ice cream theme.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Linda!
I'm kind of loving the whole ice cream thing, especially the vintage ice cream signs. I really like that kind of thing. But then again. Okay, let's try this again with the proper amount of paint. There we go. Look at you, Trace. You can almost do things. Almost. Some days I can mess up the Lord's Prayer. Other days, though, I can rock it. Today is not the day. Today is not the day. So my paint is heavily thinned. And I'm thinking I've actually go from one extreme to the other. I got a split in my brush. There we are. Much better. And I'm going to use my extra long detail liner to add the final details to this. It is very fine. So I'm thinking the liner is the best idea. There we go. And again, I'm going to do something that kind of goes against the grain a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to sand this because I want this to have that distressed appearance just like the rest of the subject matter here. And so, distressed it is.
Nancy's making sure that I put her name in.
Yep.
Definitely got Nancy on there now.
Yep. Make sure you like and share the video. And join us in the chat so that we get your name.
Kate Reynolds, been a couple of years since I won.
There we go. Okay, so my lettering is on. Oh, for the love of Pete. I have just this knack today. Like I said, I could forget the Lord's Prayer. Good gravy, Marie. There we go. Gail said hi. So I'm drawing this really well because I'm going to sand it lightly. I'm going to wear it down. Now, if you want to, you can spatter this whole thing. I kind of like the matte black and then all the color up front. There's just something about that for me. So, I think the lettering is almost dry. So, I'm going to take my sanding sponge. I'm using the extra fine side. Debbie Easton. I've never won yet. Oh my goodness. So I'm just going to gently distress my lettering, which means I'm focusing the sanding on the lettering. I want to wear this lettering down just a little. There we go. And then I'm going to take some heavily thinned lamp black and I'm going to subdue that lettering just a little. But that has a benefit too, that's twofold by doing this. If I've scratched the background, then by sanding it lightly, I put some of that black back in. So I'm going to dry this really well. And then I just have one more thing to do to this. And then Renee is going to spin the wheel. It's taking its time drying right now. As always, the video will be available on my YouTube channel, so you can watch it at your leisure. So I've got my 0.7. To be on the wheel, do you have to like and share on YouTube or just chat on Facebook? Either or both. We take the names from both Facebook and YouTube. Yes, no, everybody gets on the wheel. Facebook included. So, scribblature. I've dried that. One thing I love about working on these 8x10 hardboard panels is that I have the ability to frame them. So to finish this out, 1 or 2 light coats of Decor matte spray to seal the piece. And then you can varnish it whatever type you want. I'm a fan of Decoart's Ultra Matte Varnish, but I like a matte finish. So, but you can use whatever you want. So to remove those graphite lines, you need your Factus Black or your Tombow Black soft eraser. I like either one. The reason being is that it will take off graphite lines quite easily, and it doesn't hurt your paint. It won't remove your paint. It won't leave shiny spots on your black background. I do a lot of black backgrounds, so I don't like it when I get shiny spots due to erasers. So there we go. Little bud. I love my black erasers. There we are. In the garden. Fun piece. Yay.
Price time.
And now it's price time.
Did it work?
I don't know. Did it work? All I see is the big... There it is. Oh my goodness. That's a crammed wheel.
Yup. There's buku de names on there.
I would say. So, good luck to everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Lots of names on that wheel, so if you're ready to spin. So, again, just to reiterate, the prizes today, we have some Tombow goodies, Tombow pencils, and a bunch of other stuff, including some stencils. And Sharon Klein. Sharon's in Nova Scotia. Awesome sauce. Congratulations, Sharon.
Go, Sharon 9.
And the next one goes to
I won't have a chance. Poor Judy.
Kathy Van Roy. Kathy's in Southern Ontario. And we have one more to give away.
Giggity. And boop.
Margaret, don't be surprised if you see more watering cans, because I love them too. And Paula Vaggie. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys. I love this piece. I'm glad that you do too. It's a fun one to paint, and it's pretty easy to do if you follow the steps. Awesome. So we have 3 winners. We have Kathy Van Roy, Sharon Klein, and Paula Vaggie. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoy your goodies. Everybody, have a great weekend. Enjoy a little sunshine, a little bit of peace and quiet would be so nice.
Sweet tea.
And sweet tea. What is it with you and tea these days? Sweet tea in particular.
It's summer.
It's
It's
summer.
what you drink.
It's what you drink. Okay, fair enough. All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. If you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. Just click on the big red subscribe button and turn on notifications, bell notifications, so that you get notified whenever we go live or whenever we post new video. And to everybody on Facebook, please like the Tracy Morrow live page. Give us a follow. Hit the follow button. And join us here every Saturday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. We have a new fun project for you to paint and create with. And until then, mwah, we love you. Stay safe.
Pet your dog!
And pet your dog.
Gotta pet the dog. Because if you don't pet the dog, who will?